every now and then it sounds like there are these cases where people are like, this is what I want from you, why won't you give it to me? It's not actually a lack of understanding, it's just a lack of experience. Young people are good at everything except losing, and that's a bad thing. We're gonna be talking about all that and more, but first, coffee. Today's coffee is Mexico Cruz Grande. If someone can tell me what that actually means in the comments, I would love it. I assume they're from Mexico, given the name. Today's topic actually comes from a video that I watched recently on the official again, it always comes from Street Fighter, the official Street Fighter page. There was a documentary. They have a bunch of interviews with a bunch of players who've been, you know, playing Street Fighter, old players and young players, and what they happened upon is this trend that young players are really, really good at this game, and in fact, giving a lot of the old players, even though they were playing the game in tournaments before the young people were even born yet, why is it that the young people were beating the old people at the game? Perhaps it's because they're just better at it at the game, maybe it's the way that they were born into the internet generation, or maybe the game has been just made easier for people who grew up with pads as opposed to people who play with arcade sticks. Perhaps maybe people who play with arcade sticks are even at a disadvantage, who knows? But actually that turned out to not be the main point of the narrative in the documentary, and this absolutely blew me away. I really recommend that you go and watch it. It's part 3 of the Street Fighter 30th anniversary documentary series. And in the documentary they hit on this really interesting point where they realized that actually young players, even though they're really, really good at winning, they're actually not really great at taking a loss. And that turned out to be their disadvantage. Let's grind! It was in the documentary when Momochi and I think Chocoblanca are sitting next to each other talking about what they do with, you know, they're not art school, their gaming school. So they train young players and they're really doing their best to make sure that they nurture the gaming community, the fighting game community out in Japan. But one point in this documentary, they start saying well, we got all these young players coming in, and the thing is they're very, very resourceful and very good at winning. All the stuff that we've come to hear that Millennials and Generation Z have actually been really good at. They tend to know exactly what they want, how to get it, and they don't waste any time doing a lot of stuff that Millennials, and I think technically I fall into the Millennial category, where normally I would go, okay, I'm gonna go and do a course. I was really interested in art courses in Japan, so I was like, I'm gonna go to Japan, I'm gonna learn how to draw, and I was like, it has to be at a course. I don't want to learn from just randomly, you know, getting better while I'm in Japan. I actually wanted to do a specific course. I thought there was a way to learn. I thought there was a specific set out way that I could figure out how to do it, and I wanted to know the way to do it. It's actually the younger generation that thinks, you know, stuff it to the way that people say that you should do it. Maybe we should just find the most efficient method of learning it, the most inexpensive, efficient way, and it turns out Generation Z is incredibly good at this, and I think what we're seeing as a manifest of this is that young players are coming into tournaments and winning stuff, and the older players don't really know how to do it. We went to the arcades and we would experience putting our money in, and we would have to win because we didn't want to lose money and have to pay more money to play again. But at the same time, they also experienced losing, and losing in person next to people. So not online where it's like, okay, I lost and I don't know who I lost to. But for the older generation, they experienced going to the arcades, being face to face with someone, losing to them, and then having to get back on their feet afterwards. And so for a lot of older players, losing is actually just part of gaming. Yes, of course the goal is to win, but losing is actually also fun. It's like, okay, I lost, but hey, we played, we had fun, and that's a part of it. The way that the documentary is angled is it makes it look like the younger players are really out to win, and I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the way that it was put. And in a way it's quite believable. From what you see on the internet, on YouTube videos, from live streamers, from people acting the way that they do at tournaments, they get really, really heated and really, really upset when they don't win. And fair enough, everyone wants to win. Okay, the beans are done, so I'm going to put the hot water in the coffee. So this actually goes back to a video that came out a little while ago, maybe it was last year or the year ago, or the year before. It was a Simon Sinek video, and I think it was entitled Simon Answers the Millennial Question. And it really made me think about that video when I watched this Street Fighter documentary. And what you have is Momochi sitting there saying, well, you have these young players and they're incredibly good at winning competitions, but you notice that when it comes to losing, something strange happens. And it seems like it's actually just that they haven't been exposed to the feeling of losing, and especially losing in person, which is something that a lot of the players, like the older players, had to experience a lot. And so for the older players, if I'm reading into it a little bit more, actually they're playing it not just for the wins, but also for the losses. And I'm sure that a majority of the younger players are also doing the exact same thing. But from when you look at it on the streams and from the way that people react, and it's just incredibly emotional for people, they feel it really hits them in the core. It's just like this incredible futility, regret, and loss and defeat when they actually lose a match. And so in the one regard, it actually makes esports more exciting, right? Because everyone is having a more gut reaction, a more emotional response to the fact that they're losing in competition. And as a viewer, that's incredibly fun to watch. But then I think it is indicative of something that is a much larger problem for young people these days. I'm not saying like the young people are the problem, I'm saying it's a problem that young people will have to deal with because they didn't receive the same training or just didn't grow up in the same environment that older players did. And it's because of, I mean, it's absolutely down to things like the internet, but through the internet we have a huge access to resources, pretty much any piece of information that you want, that, you know, we just did not have access to before. And so that was kind of a disciplining experience as older people and these older players had to deal with the fact that they couldn't always have what they want when they wanted it. And with the younger generation, it kind of doesn't make any sense that you wouldn't just go out and take what's essentially things that you feel are already yours, like we deserve it. Like it comes with all these talks that people have about entitlement, and maybe people are entitled to things. And even in my own experience, if I see my own parents not going out and doing the things that I think that they deserve, things that in my opinion are more important than the things that they find important, so they may find that just sitting down and doing the hard work is more important, whereas for me, I'm like, look, you can sit here and suffer, or you can just go and take the easier route and get to what you actually want. Isn't that the goal? And for a lot of older people, the goal is to do this noble thing, to be disciplined and sit through it. And that's where the enjoyment comes from. So it's different for people of different generations. Just take this filter off here. Mexico Cruz Grande. See how it tastes. Gonna pretend that I can smell it. Smells like warm. I just realized that I just poured all this water in without actually measuring how hot it was. This is my non-thermostat controlled kettle. Oops. Oh, it reminds me of being back in Bali. When I was drinking coffee in Bali, it tastes like that. There's something kind of dry, I feel like I'm in the jungle. I don't know if I would drink coffee when I'm in the jungle, but it tastes jungle-like. So I should point out that these aren't fully formed opinions, absolutely not. This is literally, I've just been watching the documentary and thinking, that is so fascinating that we have this divide between the Generation X, Generation Y, actually I don't even, I forgot the order, right, but it's like Generation X, Generation Y, the Millennials, and then you've got like Generation Z. And with the Millennial generation, I think what's happened is actually, I should actually be closer to the Generation Y. But I think just existing on the internet, being part of all the hype for things, always seeing things and going, hey, DLC shouldn't be handled like that, I demand that these companies change stuff, all this entitlement, and assuming like things should be the way that I want them to, and when they're not the way that I want them to, I get really frustrated, and really the only person who suffers is me, because I'm feeling frustrated about something that I feel like I deserve, whereas a large number of people who are my age or people who are older than me, they see stuff that isn't the way they want it, and they don't feel a frustration. But that's a completely different discussion. What's interesting is that we've got these Generation Xers, Generation Y, you know, the gamers are essentially Generation Y and the Millennials, and especially especially this Generation Z as well. And from what I'm reading on the internet and seeing in videos and stuff, is that Generation Z is incredibly well positioned to get anything they want. And more often than not, they can swoop in and take everything that they want. But as a result, and by being able to like swoop past all the millennials who are basically just swimming in loans and debt and not essentially being experts at the things that they thought they were going to be experts at, what's really interesting is that the Generation Z people, they're just experiencing success so often that in fact it's to their detriment. I just did not see that coming in this documentary, in this Street Fighter documentary, part 3. Again, please go and watch it. It's so enjoyable, and honestly, I cried at the end. What a phenomenal concept, that actually just the fact that young people experience success so often that as a result, not having that discipline of going through loss means sometimes they're like in an existential quandary. They don't know, how could this have happened? I did this, this, and this, and therefore I should get this, because 99.9% of the time when I do this, this, and this, I get this result. And for millennials, for Generation Y, and especially Generation X, it was rarely like that. It was like, hey, if you want to get ahead, it would be, you know, wise for you to do this course, and then maybe you'll end up over here. But it was still kind of chance. It was like, hey, if you do a course in business, you're quite likely to end up closer to a place where you can go and provide consultancy and take over some business and become really successful. But I think for the Generation Z, it's like, they go on the online courses, they're doing it inexpensively, they're doing a whole lot of self-motivated, self-taught stuff, which is clearly leading to huge amounts of success. And I just find it so interesting that it's that success which is kind of to their detriment, and I just never saw that coming. The reason that it's a topic today, though, is that I feel very passionately about how I would prefer that this doesn't become a problem for young people emotionally and mentally. And so when unable to get the result that was, in a way, always the case, it was like 1 + 1 = 2, 1 + 1 = 2, and then suddenly 1 + 1 = there's no answer, and suddenly it's like, what? What's going on? What it sounds like from speaking to my friends who are working in education, from watching all these videos about people in the esports arena, even people who are not in esports, just playing games competitively, people just existing on the internet, going out, basically taking the world. It's the whole world is mine kind of way of thinking. And that's cool, because a lot of people are incredibly well motivated, and by necessity, right? They've been forced to go out and get what's theirs, because no longer is anything being handed out to them. Every now and then it sounds like there are these cases where people are like, this is what I want from you, why won't you give it to me? It's not actually a lack of understanding, it's just a lack of experience of not getting what you want. More often than not, especially in Japan, when people see young people going out and just learning on their own, they're like, whoa, you're a Sugoi person, wow, I don't know how you're doing that, that's amazing. And you kind of, on the young person's side, you're kind of like, I don't understand why no one else is doing this. It's, okay, well, millennials learned to use the internet because it was invented while they were already born. And then for Generation Z, it already existed before they were born. So now they're just masters of the internet. But it sounds like, as a result, it's leading to mental issues, it's leading to unpredictable behavior, it's leading to violent behavior, it's leading to actions and moods and mental states that are making the individual themselves feel frustrated and lost, when in fact it sounds like it's not their fault. It's like the world took away a lot of the experiences that you would have had. Like, for example, the most physical one that we can speak about is the arcade center. Even if you said, young people, hey, you should have gone to the arcade and you should have seen, you should have understood what it's like to lose to other people. Nowadays, you just go online, you just press reset, you just rage quit whatever you want. We can't even say that to a young person because, in a way, by the time they were born, the arcades had already, well, they were already on their way out or gone already, so it's not their fault. And this is the recurring story with the millennial question, with the Generation Z question, if there is a question. The answer almost always tends to be, it is the people up top, the people that we were relying on taking care of us, who have failed us. They haven't taken care of their employees. They haven't invested themselves emotionally in the people that they're employing, the young people, the new people that they're employing. And as a result, the young people are coming in feeling completely disowned. And as a result, they leave the company and go off and do something else without any real feeling of remorse for leaving the company early. It's like, okay, I was at this company for 3 months and I didn't like it. I didn't feel like I was making a difference, and then they disappear. And it's to be expected, right? So I haven't experienced every single workplace, so I'm not going to say like I know it is exactly like this in all workplaces. But from what I've personally experienced, it's like, well, you can't blame young people because you're not giving them the job security and all of the things that you gave to the Generation X community and even the Generation Y community. So when you expect the same results from your Generation Z and Millennial employees, but what actually happens is they become frustrated, they get upset, they quit their jobs, they end up acting erratically and unpredictably. In a way, it's kind of unsurprising, and it sounds like 100% preventable. It could have been prevented. A lot of these things could have been prevented. But it almost always comes down to people in power abusing their responsibility or misunderstanding their responsibility, not knowing that they have responsibility. As the generations get younger and younger and younger, we lose more and more of that traditional, hey, the people who are up top, they seem to reap the most benefits, but also they're the ones most responsible. But what I've heard from a lot of people joining like startup companies, it's like, okay, these people are really responsible. They're going to hire this huge number of people for this new team, and then the company is going to disappear in 3 months. And what does that mean for these young people? It's just like, they're just constantly experiencing this like lack of emotional connection, which goes on to the whole online environment where there's already a lack of emotional connection. And then of course, this whole idea of rage quitting, you know, and if you're not familiar with the idea of the rage quit, it's basically when you're about to lose, you just pull the plug on your computer, or you just press the reset button so that you don't actually have that counter move up. Now this is another topic. There's so many topics that I always want to talk about, but one of the topics that I feel really passionate about is how we use social media to validate ourselves. And I think it's a shame because I think a lot of us could be living happier days, happier lives, if we felt less pressure to get validation from social media, from technology, from algorithms, all of these things. So clearly, even though this whole topic started as a sort of, hey, young people don't know how to lose, how come they're getting so emotional about losing? It's actually a much bigger problem, and unfortunately for the older generation, it is actually coming around to be like, hey, actually, guess what? This is the future you created. This is the world that you left behind for us, and now we're the ones dealing with it. And this is how we're acting. But that's a huge other topic, and really what I just wanted to say was the Street Fighter documentary was amazing! Please go and watch it, and I was just incredibly moved. So much respect now for the Japanese fighting game community. Every time I hear a documentary and watch a documentary, unfortunately because I understand a lot more Japanese than I used to, like I can actually get a lot more from the Japanese only interviews, the ones that sometimes they don't get translated. I feel like the older Japanese fighting game generation is heavily invested in this, and they care deeply, not just for the game, but for the community, for the older players, and especially for the younger players, because they don't see the younger players as just young people who just win. They see them as rivals, they see them as equals. It's so funny because I think Momochi thought he was just talking about the fighting game community, but what he's actually talking about, and maybe he is aware of this, is the much wider discussion about how we are going to support the Generation Z, the Millennials, how Generation Y is going to survive in this new environment. And clearly it's coming down to finding out who is responsible and who can and will act where they have the ability to do so. I think you can see that this is a very large topic and a really important one, and essentially it all results in better mental health and welfare for young people. And I think if we don't take care of ourselves and take care of anyone younger than ourselves, we have a dark future to look forward to, so yay! Hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, share the links with anyone who you think would be even vaguely interested in this topic. Do share it with them, please. I love when you guys do that. And I'll see you in the next NihongoGamer video. Mexico Cruz Grande. Gonna have to buy this one again.